What's up, short attention span history nerds? My name is Mike Perry and you're watching 10 Minute History. When I was younger, I was enthralled with everything Japanese, especially samurai and ninja. I read everything I could get my hands on. I bought tons of traditional Japanese clothing, trinkets, and even studied Togakure Ryo Ninjutsu for 10 years. Now, if a 16th century samurai ever attacks me, I'm fairly certain I can handle him. Not really, he'd kill me. But there was a story I remember reading from a book I checked out from a public library that really got my attention. It was the story of a former slave brought to Japan who won his freedom and became one of the most feared samurai of the 15th century. His name, Yasuke. Yasuke is actually a transliteration of his real name, which was possibly Nause. In 1579, an African man whose real name has been lost to history, known only by the name Yasuke, arrived in Japan. A lot about Yasuke is a mystery. It's believed that he was from Mozambique, since Yasuke is close to the name Nause, which was a common name at the time. What's not speculation is that Yasuke was a real-life African-born samurai who served under Oda Nobunaga, one of the most important feudal lords in Japanese history. Nobunaga was one of the three unifiers of Japan. When Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579, he was with an Italian Jesuit priest named Alessandro Vigliano. Yasuke was in service to Vigliano, most likely as a bodyguard disguised as a valet. At the time, priests were not allowed to retain soldiers or guards, but they could have valets or manservants. Many of the priest's valets were especially large, strong, and skilled at the use of various weapons. So, soldier, valet, potato, it was pretty much the same thing. In 1581, Vigliano headed to what was then the capital city, Kyoto, to meet with Nobunaga and request permission to leave Japan. Japan at the time was a closed country, no one in, no one out without permission. To do so meant immediate death. And it was on this trip that Yasuke crossed paths with Oda Nobunaga. Standing 6 feet 2 inches tall and described as darker than coal and having the strength of 10 men, Yasuke left a strong impression on Nobunaga. At their first meeting, Nobunaga stood in disbelief at the sight of Yasuke. You see, in the 16th century Japan, Japanese gods and demons were black. Every Japanese temple had a statue or statues of black-colored gods and demons. It was reported by Vigliano that Nobunaga cautiously approached Yasuke, licked his palm, and ran it across Yasuke's face, believing it was black ink. When the color didn't rub off, he ordered his men to strip Yasuke down to his waist and scrub him with water and sponges. Once he came to realize that Yasuke was real, he threw a lavish party in his honor, believing that the gods had sent him a deity to oversee his kingdom. Nobunaga granted Vigliano his departure, but refused to let Yasuke leave. Nobunaga now believed he had a god in his service. He gave him a ceremonial katana, his own resident, and money. Nobunaga then assigned him to be his personal weapons bearer. Yasuke fought alongside Nobunaga valiantly for many years. During the Battle of Tenmokuzan in 1582, Yasuke was instrumental in Nobunaga's defeating the Takeda clan. One story tells of Yasuke running towards several of Takeda's men when his mempo, or demon mask, fell off, uncovering his real face. Takeda's men believed a demon had disguised himself as a samurai and was coming to steal their souls. The men stripped off their weapons and their helmet, then fled to the mountains, never to be heard of again. Another story has Takeda himself coming face to face with Yasuke and believing that he was on stilts, since he was a foot taller than most Japanese men at the time. Takeda threw a dart or a blade at Yasuke's shin. When his shin began to bleed, Takeda fell to the ground and begged for mercy from the deity. He asked him to join his forces. Yasuke refused, and shortly after, Takeda was defeated and he and his wife committed suicide. En route to another battle in 1582, but 1582 was a very busy year for Yasuke. Nobunaga was ambushed by his general, Akechi Mitsuhide. Nobunaga was lodged at the Honoji temple with little protection. He and his men were working out a plan to unite all of Japan under one rule while resting up for the next battle. Mitsuhide was not thrilled with the idea of a unified Japan, and along with his men, they turned and attacked Nobunaga and his men. This would come to be known as the Honoji Incident. Nobunaga only had 30 men, while Akechi had 13,000. Yasuke was one of the 30 men fighting alongside Nobunaga. Nobunaga was speared in the back by one of Akechi's men. When he realized that it was a fatal wound, he decided not to give Akechi the honor of his death. Nobunaga was ashamed of his defeat and performed seppuku, a form of ritual suicide that involves slicing open one's abdomen. It's regarded as a way of retaining honor even in death. It was his last victory through honor. Instead of being killed by his enemy and giving him power over his life, he performed seppuku, which sent the message of being in control of his death. Yasuke was in the temple with Nobunaga when he performed seppuku. Now, there's no record, but tradition holds that Yasuke was the one who took Nobunaga's head to save it from falling into Akechi's hands. Yasuke took off to the mountains with Nobunaga's head and he hid. If Akechi had gotten the head, he'd been able to hold it up, showing that he had a powerful symbol of legitimacy to becoming the new feudal lord. After the attack on Nobunaga, Akechi did not get much support and was soon defeated in battle. Yasuke, therefore, by escaping with the head of Nobunaga, changed the course of Japanese history. Now, shortly after Nobunaga's death, Yasuke joined Oda Nobutada, the son of Nobunaga, who was nearby. Now, with Nobunaga dead, Yasuke felt obliged to join forces with his son. Just as soon as he had joined Nobutada, a second battle erupted. Now, while Nobutada had 200 men, not 30, Akechi still had 13,000. So, once again, Yasuke was on the losing end. And that can't be good for your self-esteem. Now, on that same day, Nobunaga performed seppuku. His son, Nobutada, disgraced in battle, also performed seppuku. Yasuke was left wounded on the battlefield. When Yasuke was presented to Akechi, the warlord allegedly said that this black man was an animal and he was also not Japanese and should not be killed but taken to the Christian church in Kyoto, the Nambaji, or Southern Barbarian Temple. However, there is some dispute regarding the credibility of his fate. There's no further written information about him after this. Though his fate and the last years of his life remain unknown, Yasuke has lived on in the imagination of many Japanese who grew up with the award-winning children's book Kurosuke by Kurosuru Yoshio. The book, which dramatizes Yasuke's life, ends with a bittersweet note. When Nobunaga kills himself, Kurosuke is taken to a temple where he dreams of his parents in Africa and he weeps. The late Black Panther actor Chadwick Boseman was set to play Yasuke in a featured film, but passed away before the concept became a reality. One of the things I learned, according to IMDb, is there are several Yasuke films and documentaries in pre-production. Now, nearly 500 years later, his unusual life continues to inspire people all over the world that hear his story. So that's the brief history of the first African-born Japanese samurai. If you like short history videos with sarcasm and humor, consider subscribing to 10-Minute History. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I would also like to hear your thoughts on Yasuke or information I may have left out that you feel was important. Click the bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time. When Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579, he was with an Italian Jesuit priest named Alessandro Vigliano. Well, that's not right. In 1581, Vigliano headed to what was then the capital city of Kyoto. No, that wasn't the capital city of Kyoto. Standing 6'2", standing 6 feet tall,